Hi, everybody. This is Dr. Scott McMahon, and this is another episode of Medicine and Miracles. And today we have a very special guest. This is Ariana Thacker, and she is the CEO of MoldCo.com. We're going to learn all about MoldCo today and how it's going to revolutionize the care for mold-based illnesses and the like in that space. Ariana, welcome. How are you today?
Thank you, Dr. Scott. I'm feeling really well. How about you?
I'm having a great day.
Great.
Every day is a great day.
Yeah, life's the dream.
Life is a dream. Hey, Ariana, do you think maybe you could tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, your personal journey, how you found yourself in the mold toxicity space?
Yeah, happy to. Also want to open with I'm so grateful to be working with you and MoldCo. That's a dream come true for me personally and also the entire company and our patients. So yeah, just thank you so much for that. I'm so appreciative. And thank you for hosting me on your show. And some background on me. Hi, Ariana, founder of MoldCo. Started the company from a personal mold journey, which took my life for a unique turn. So started having mystery symptoms. I've only had a very normal medical history, no prior diagnoses, not on medication, no other illnesses. And when I moved into a new home in Miami, just had an onset of very odd symptoms for me, including brain fog, fatigue, etc. A lot of the normal symptom clusters that you see related to mold illness or mold toxicity, and that journey to better health inspired MoldCo. So wanting to bring that to patients around the world to not have to go through the level of, I would say, misinformation, confusion, high dollar spend, frustration, gaslighting, etc., that is so common to these types of patients.
Absolutely. Do you want to tell us a little bit about the misinformation that you experienced?
Yeah, for sure. I think there's a lot of misinformation online, ranging from misdiagnoses to misdiagnoses. So a lot of folks look through the Facebook forums and believe they may have MCAS. What we've seen, speaking to our providers, for example, is that that's actually more of an edge case than the norm. So that's just one data point. Another one is around which types of testing to use and what those tests can demonstrate. For example, there's a lot of I wouldn't say misinformation, but confusion around the benefits of urinary mycotoxin tests versus antibody tests versus some of the labs that we use, the more inflammatory markers. I would say going through mainstream medicine and the whole host of specialists that you end up seeing, from maybe you'll see a neurologist, a pulmonologist, immunologist, allergist. There's just not the right diagnostic tools to better understand what's going on with you and your body, which often leads to what some patients experience as medical gaslighting. So there's just a number of ways that that shows up during the patient journey as they try to get to clarity around what's going on with their health.
Wow, you brought up medical gaslighting. I can't let that go. Do you want to explain that a little bit more?
Yeah, I'll actually channel what some of our prospective patients, actual patients, and customer discovery interviews have shared. But I'd say on the worst end of the spectrum, some of these patients have been referred to psych wards because they weren't believed that their symptoms were real, which I find that very surprising because a lot of these symptoms do have physical manifestations. You can see the weight gain, you can experience the hair loss, you can visually see that the patient maybe is a pale appearance and some of these other more physical markers. And assuming this patient has sound medical history and mental health history, why is this patient not being believed? So I find that very confusing and disturbing, and I'm just not sure why that exists, but that seems to be very common. And then other doctors then say, mold can't cause these symptoms, or mold doesn't cause illness beyond allergies, asthma, or a fungal infection. So then that narrative is pushed forward, and then those symptoms are further not believed, especially as their labs show up normal with a lot of the common lab testing that these specialists and providers offer.
Yes. And to be honest with you, in my experience, when I started doing this kind of work back in 2009, 2010, it was not unusual for a patient to have seen 30, 40, even 50 other doctors before they got to me. And almost every one of them had been told that this was some sort of depression or that they needed to see a psychiatrist or maybe they needed an SSRI. Almost every patient had been through that. It's really sad. And the problem from my point of view is that doctors are very sure about what they do and what's in their wheelhouse. When you get to something that's outside of their wheelhouse, then they become much less confident. And one of the things that we were taught is that if a patient has symptoms but no lab tests based on the lab tests that we've been taught how to use, that maybe it's a psychological problem. Maybe they're somaticizing. Maybe some of them are malingering where they're actually making it up. Sometimes it's Munchausen's. But you're absolutely correct, because these people have symptoms and they reproducibly have abnormal lab tests. You just have to know what the right tests are to test. And if you don't know those tests, you'll miss this every time. Yeah, thank you for that perspective. So yeah, so you want to tell us something about MoldCo? What is MoldCo? What is the mission of MoldCo? What are you trying to do?
Yeah, absolutely. So MoldCo is the first of its kind healthcare platform aimed to treating patients with mold toxicity. And that includes specialized lab testing now available through our platform nationwide. So folks that want to test their labs, the key inflammatory markers associated with mold exposure, they can do that through our platform. We're soon launching out the HLA haplotype testing, which is a cheek swab. So if you're a bit phobic or queasy with needles, that's also a really good option to pursue. I know I personally am, so I love just having a cheek swab option. We also have specialized care on the platform, so you can meet with our trained providers and they'll guide you every step of the way through our treatments. And we offer the host of most commonly prescribed treatments in this space. So that includes colisevalam, prescribed off-label for this use case. That also includes an EDTA-based nasal spray to help address some of the symptoms and issues we see in the nasal passages. And then also a VIP peptide is included as well. So those are the common tools and the toolkits that our providers offer to our patients. So all of that is included under one umbrella. That's MoldCo, and it's all digital. We've worked really hard to make it as affordable and accessible as possible. The average spend per patient as of today ranges between $150 to $300 all in per month, everything included, the medication, the meetings with the providers, et cetera. So yeah, that's what we're building at MoldCo. We're launching that nationwide. So we're doing our state-by-state rollout. At the moment, we have a closed beta, but we're evolving past that closed beta to then have this open shopping cart experience where anyone can come to our website and check out and meet with our provider and go through the flow.
Wow, did you say like $100 to $300 a month for
Yeah.
that's ridiculous. My goodness. I mean, people oftentimes are spending thousands of dollars a month to get care for illness that is related to perhaps mold exposure or mold toxicity. That's unbelievable. How can you do that?
Yeah, we've actually heard, I'd say on the low end, the most common number is 10,000 all in for care. I've met families that have spent closer to over 500,000. Someone else on the team said $2 million was the highest number they've heard all in for care. So it's just orders of magnitude lower than what's available today. And how we're doing that is mainly through our pharmacy relationships, our relationships with the labs, just to be able to get that lower pricing, and also creating a system and platform that can deliver care in a more automated way. So we spent a lot of time really understanding the logic that goes into our platform and understanding how to scale that. So there's efficiencies there, there's the partnerships, and also wanting to make the world a better place. So you just become more creative in finding ways to find affordable solutions for patients when you have that lens.
Well, that's absolutely amazing, Ariana, and kudos to you for bringing that to market. And speaking of that, I mean, how many people do you think mold toxicity will affect? I mean, are we looking at hundreds here? Are we looking at thousands? Or um, just what kind of demand do you think there is in this market?
Yeah, and I'm curious to hear your number on that too, and if we lined up at the same spot. But we looked at the mold market from a few different lenses. So we looked at the number of homes impacted by water damage, these large studies for water damage, mold, dampness, et cetera. We looked at the size of the remediation and inspector market. We looked at the HLA haplotype testing data to get a percentage of patients that could have a biological or genetic susceptibility to biotoxin illness. We looked at prevalence rates of the most common misdiagnosis and misdiagnosis in this space. We looked at the other types of illnesses too that we've seen commonly associated with these patients that may be developed downstream after mold exposure happens and there's an onset of health issue. So we looked at this from a lot of different lenses to create this very large spreadsheet. And the range that we came up with was on the low end around 8 million people and on the high end, maybe 40 million people. So I think it's somewhere in between that. And my best guess there is probably around the 30 million mark. So at least, around 10% of Americans or so impacted, and globally probably around the same number. But we won't actually know until this type of testing and this type of filtering is part of the primary care visit. This should be an annual screening. This shouldn't be an afterthought after someone gets quite sick and doesn't have answers and spends a lot of money and relocations, et cetera. This should be screened much sooner in the medical process and ideally as part of the annual visit. But I'm so curious what your number is. Is it in that range? Is it far off? Where did you land?
Yeah, it's not that far off. What I looked at, I think it was when the population of the United States was 328 million people. I looked at a genetic predisposition of roughly 25%. And according to the EPA, at least 50% of the buildings in the United States have a history of water damage. So 50%, I just went with 50% of homes, 50% of businesses, and 50% of schools. I looked at pediatric populations and adult populations, and I came up with a number of 52 million people would be both genetically predisposed and being exposed on a daily basis or 5 days a week. Now, that doesn't mean that all of them will have illness. So I think that 30 to 40 million is probably right on. I've also looked at things like chronic headaches in pediatrics. According to the peer-reviewed published literature, 17%, that's 1 out of every 6 kids between the ages of 4 and 18, have chronic headaches, and nobody knows what causes them. Some of those are caused by migraines, some are cluster headaches, but nobody really knows what causes them. So typically in the medical community, they say stress. That's the go-to answer when we don't know what the pathophysiology is. In my experience as a pediatrician is about 90% of those kids have chronic inflammatory response syndrome, which is a form of mold toxicity. And when you treat them with cholestyramine or colesevelam, 90% of them, their headaches go away. So I think there's a large number. And that's 10 million kids, by the way. 10 million kids in the United States have chronic headaches. 10 million kids. Just one symptom. If you look at chronic stomach issues, abdominal pains and whatnot, it comes out to about the same numbers, about 10 million just kids. And the same for adults. And again, in my data, I found about 90% of people. So when you add all that up, I come to probably somewhere around 30 to 40 million people are sick. So we're right on there. And that wraps up part 1 of our interview with Ariana Thacker. She's the CEO of MoldCo. That's MOLD capital CO. It's all one word. And stay tuned as we complete this interview on our next episode of Medicine and Miracles. And if you want to meet Ariana or hear her speak live, well, she's going to be giving a presentation at the annual Surviving Mold CIRS X conference. It's going to be held in Tempe, Arizona, on June 6th, 7th, and 8th. So you want to be there. You want to be there. And if you go to www.cirsx.com and you decide to go to the meeting, you can include a coupon, DRSCOTT, all caps, followed by a 10, all one word, Dr. Scott 10, and you'll get 10% off the admission price. Okay, so let's now go to our next miracle. So for today's miracle, it's not really going to sound like a miracle, but I'm going to tell you in retrospect, it was a miracle. Wow. Back when I was like 20 years old, I was living in Northern California and I was involved with this young men's organization called DMOLAY. That's DE capital MOLAY. And it was associated with the Shriners and the Masons and whatnot. And my father was a Mason and a Shriner for like 50 years. And so he got me introduced into it. And it was a fun time. We did a lot of fun stuff. We went to dances every weekend. I guess that was good to meet girls and learn how to interact with them. We went to baseball games. Like we would go to the San Francisco Giants, and we would actually get to go like a parade onto the field, coming in from center field and walking almost to second base before we'd turn around and go back out. It was a really cool experience, and I got to do that a bunch of times. So DMLA was a young men's organization. It was good for me. Now, as time went on, I kind of rose up through the ranks of DMLA. And so I became the head dude for my own chapter of DMLA guys for the city of Modesto that I grew up in. And that was an awesome experience. Taught me a lot about leadership and just doing a lot of things and working with men who worked as mentors who wanted to offer their time. And it was good. And teaching younger men, some of the lessons that I learned. I mean, all in all, it was a very good experience. And then I actually started to rise to even higher levels. So the highest level within an individual chapter was called the Master Counselor. And I was the Master Counselor for a little over 6 months. But then there are higher, or like a hierarchy of higher organizations. So living in Northern California, we were in the jurisdiction of NorCal, and there were 5 different areas within NorCal called divisions. And I was part of the Valley Division because I grew up in the Central Valley of California. Well, I actually became the deputy Master Counselor of the Valley Division. So that was like I was the number 2 guy in this Valley area. And there were, 23 chapters, something like that, probably 500 young men. And there were some women or girls, young girls organizations associated with that. And we got together, like I said, a couple times a week. We'd have dances, just a lot of fun, clean fellowship. And it was a great time. Well, I ended up becoming, like I said, the number 2 guy in the Valley Division. And we were coming to our annual convention, and I actually organized the convention. And that was a great experience. Here I'm like 20, 21 years old. And I'm organizing an entire conference for maybe 1,000 people coming. It was quite a responsibility. And I decided that I was going to run to be the Master Counselor or the head dude of this Valley Division. And it was one of those times before I became a praying kind of person. But I heard somebody, I actually got to meet the grand poobah. I mean, the big guy, the head of the highest level, the international level of this organization. I got to meet him because he was a friend of mine. And I remember him saying, I don't know if I should have done this. Maybe I should have just gone to college instead and started my life. And I started thinking about that. It's like, what if I'm not supposed to do this? Maybe I should focus, my life and finish my college studies and go on instead of becoming the grand poobah of the Valley Division, or it's actually called the Master Counselor, not the grand poobah. So I actually prayed about that. And I said, again, I'm not a praying person at this time, but I remember telling guys, if you want me to just go off to college and start my life, then I'll do that. But if you want me to do this for the next year, because that's how long the term was, if you want me to do this for the next year, then let me win the election. Well, we came to the election day, and I was from the southern portion of the Valley Division, and there was a northern portion, and they were going to vote, on who was going to be the new master counselor for the Valley Division, and I had it locked up. Except 4 of my delegates didn't show up. 4 of the people that are going to vote for me. And 1 person from my own chapter ended up voting against me, and I ended up losing by 1 vote. By 1 vote on the first ballot. And if there were 3 people running, if I hadn't lost on the first ballot, I would have gotten his votes and I would have won on the second ballot. But I lost on the first ballot by 1 vote. Can you believe that? And I'll be honest with you, even though I already told you I prayed about this, I forgot that I prayed about this. And I was angry for a long time. I was angry about the person who won. I knew that the person who won was not a person of super high character. I know that he shouldn't even have been allowed to run because he didn't turn in his papers on time. But some people who knew him and were related to him gave him a break, etc. A whole bunch of things. I was angry at people from my own chapter because they didn't vote for me. I was angry at the people that didn't show up. I was trying to call them all weekend. You got to be here. You got to be here. And then I lost. But it was years later, like 15 years later, after I got to know Jesus, that God showed me that he answered my prayer. Even though he didn't answer it in the way I wanted him to, he answered my prayer. He wanted me to go on in life instead of spending another year with this organization. And he had a pathway set up for me that led for me to go to college and then to medical school, to meet my first wife, and to go to a tremendous residency center and just really get my life started. He had a plan for that, and this would have interfered. And so he answered my prayer. And even though I was angry for years, it was a miracle for me at the time to lose the election. So chew on that for a little while. Thank you, Jesus, for answering my prayer, even though I didn't get it at the time. 15 years later, when you showed me, I repented and I forgave, and I got rid of all of the anger that I had about that experience. And I learned a valuable lesson that sometime God's no is the best thing for you, even if you don't see it at the time. And that brings us to our moment of hope today. And I'm going to talk about a verse I think I've talked about it before, but it's Genesis 1:1. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Have you ever thought about that? Have you ever contemplated what that means, that God created the heavens and the earth? I mean, from other verses, we know he just spoke it. Light, be. Light, exist, and boom, there was light. Okay? God spoke our entire universe into existence. He is that powerful. Some people in their religious beliefs think that there's like this battle between God and his enemy, and that they're equal and they're trying to get the upper hand. It's like, no, I don't think so. The God that I serve created the universe by speaking it. There is nothing he cannot do, but he does limit himself. He does require us to participate. He wants to be partners with us. So he'll speak things to us and have us speak them out and have us pray for them so that he can come in agreement, or we can come in agreement with him. And then he is allowed, based on the rules he created, he's allowed to move. And that's how we defeat darkness. And that's how we see miracles happen, by just speaking out to God, by giving him thanks, by giving him the glory, but by knowing that he is all powerful and there is nothing he can't do. So regardless of what situation you're in today, there is nothing God cannot do. I find that very encouraging. Well, that's it for today. If you heard something that you liked, If you learn something new, please hit like and subscribe. And join us next time for our next episode of Medicine and Miracles, where we find that the mysteries of the human body are intersecting with the unsearchable God. I'm Dr. Scott McMahon. I'm your host of Medicine and Miracles. Here, bye.